Let's go back to the stages of grief for those people who um, need explanation of what they actually are. The denial, the
Mhm.
anger, the acceptance, the shock. Let's break
Yeah.
those down into words, um, so that the audience can understand exactly what those stages are and not just by the term.
So the first stage is denial, you know, and that comes in a lot of different forms for a lot of people, depending on a lot of times our initial reaction to someone's loss is denying that the loss is happening or denying that it's happened, you know, and sometimes that takes a while for some people. Some people are in that, in a very short period of time. Um, but it is a profound, thing that, I'm confronted with the fact that someone close to me has passed away, or I'm confronted with, this new reality, that I've lost my job, or whatever it is that we're grieving. So, denial plays it's usually the first reaction. The second reaction is usually anger. That, once I'm, I can't deny it anymore. Now I'm angry. I'm angry at myself. I'm angry at, sometimes at the person who passed away. I'm angry at the people who took care of them. If it's a medical situation, I'm angry at God. You know, um, but we all have, that's sort of a natural reaction to grief. Is, why did this happen? And so my emotions are usually very high, and pretty angry about why this happened to me. Then there's the bargaining phase. Um, and some people actually experience bargaining before denial, or experience bargaining in between denial and anger, where it's, you know um, a lot of times with our higher powers, we'll, be sort of bargaining with them, um, well, if you just let the person come back, take me instead, those kinds of emotions, to, to even bargaining on things that might not seem to have any difference about whether or not it brings the person back. It may be the family member that's holding on to something, um, that, an heirloom that maybe this family member intended that heirloom to go to someone else, um, but they're, sort of in this sort of bargaining about holding on to that, for whatever, because it's important to them. And sometimes we don't even know why whatever this is important to us, because that's sort of a part of processing through it, allows us to see maybe there's a memory attached to this, or something, um, that, you see this a lot of times with parents who lose children. It'll be years before their room will be exactly as they left it. um, and when someone approaches them about, packing the stuff up, or, there'll be a bargaining about that. Then usually the next phase is depression. That's the where we really have sort of gotten to the point that there's we're no longer angry at the loss. We're no longer in denial about the loss. We're no longer um, in bargaining about the loss, and we're just sort of there in our feelings, in that profound sadness that goes along with losing someone. And they're there, and we're usually there for a minute, um, just to because we need to process through what that feels like.
So
You
you're
know, the,
saying that, I'm sorry, I just want to make this clear. So you are saying that depression is normal.
Yeah, feeling depressed is absolutely normal. It's a human emotion. There's a difference between experiencing depression, or having the emotion of feeling depressed, and actually being clinically depressed, and being a diagnosis. So depression is something that happens along with grief. Along with grief, it does not mean that that you need medication or that you need treatment. It is just, those are the feelings that go along with, um, losing someone,
Or
someone that we,
something.
yeah, something that there is. Now this varies from person to person. I mean, it may not be as profound for others as it is for some people, and that's typical too. I'm not judging anybody because um, they didn't experience grief the same way that other people do. So, but we kind of go through sitting in that sadness for a minute, and then the final phase being acceptance. Where I am accepting that this has happened and beginning the process of moving on. Um, and that's not easy for everyone. Some people never completely move on. I think especially when you're talking about, especially if you're talking about the death of someone close to you, their time does heal all wounds. But it does, but I think there's still something to be said about, still feeling some things about remembering someone that we loved, and that's okay. So it may not be as paralyzing as it was in the beginning, but a lot of people who will, for instance, on the anniversary of a loss, or on that person's birthday, or on a holiday that they associated with that person, will will go through some feelings, and that's pretty typical. So it doesn't usually isn't as quite as powerful as it was in the beginning, but it is typical, and that doesn't mean that you haven't dealt with your grief, or you haven't processed your grief, because you're re-experiencing those emotions. It is what it is. It's that you can't just you can't just have someone ripped out of your life and not still be going through something behind it.
I think that that's very important, to talk about the fact that depression is a normal stage of grief and mourning, when it comes to loss, particularly
Mhm.
during this time, um, where some of us are in the acceptance phase.
Mhm.
However, we still can't move on
Yeah.
as we're still going through it.
Mhm.
So I don't know if this is correct, but I would assume that with everything that's going on and the fact that we have accepted it, but we still can't move on with it, will cause depression. And
Mhm.
then when you talk about the loss of human life, the loss of family members, people who are close to you, parents, children, siblings, I think it's important that you stated that people go through these phases at different times, and
Mhm.
there is no one way to grieve. There is no
No.
correct length of grieving. I'll just be personal. I lost my mother, passed away July of 2018. And my way of grieving, because she was well known, was to get away from everyone. And I think that sometimes when you don't experience a loss, or you don't experience a deep loss, it's hard for people to understand or to put themselves in your shoes. And some people feel that, because they're not experiencing something one way, you shouldn't experience it either. And that's just not correct. We all have our coping mechanisms, and we all experience things on different levels at different times. So having this discussion is I think is extremely important, to be able to put into words the feelings that people are having, because if you don't put into words what you're feeling, it turns into anger. We know that anger is a byproduct of whatever you're feeling that you just can't put into words. You don't know how to say you're feeling vulnerable, or I'm sad, or I have anxiety, or I'm hurt. Instead, it goes into anger.